Part 12. Pirate's Bounty Don't Run Away. Author, The Desolate Little Purity. Chapter 111. To put it more fantasy-wise, everyone has their own beliefs. The moment you take action, if you pour your pure beliefs into the edge of your sword, you will be able to exert extraordinary power. Luogu pulled Dashki up from the ground. A simpler way to put it is, the moment you take action, don't think about anything but just one thing: hack her to death. Dashki was in shock. At that moment, although Luogu didn't take action. But I don't know why, just the terrifying momentum has made me feel like I have been brought back to life several times. However, she was still a little confused about Luogu's words, and looked at him blankly. Not only her eyes, but even her glasses were confused. Luogu felt a little sad. You are an adult after all, why do you feel that you are not as enlightened as the children in Moon Village? Moon Village, Dashki grasped the key points in a subtle way. The place where I lived before I went to see Luogu said. I worked as a swordsmanship teacher for a group of little kids there for 3 years. Dashki suddenly yearned for Moon Village. Being able to let Luogu teach for 3 years, the future of these children is simply unimaginable. Well. Luogu ignored the direction of Dashki's thoughts. After pondering for a while, he asked, why did you draw your sword? For justice. Dashki spoke directly without any hesitation. Ned. Luogu nodded, intending to ask, what is justice, but then he considered that such a profound question would probably burn down Dashki's already weak core, so he gave up and said, for the sake of justice, anything can be done. Dashki thought for a moment, as long as you don't violate it, it should be fine. I should. Luogu sighed helplessly, I already know what your problem is. What is it? Dashki immediately asked seriously. I will not deny your obsession with swordsmanship. Luogu thought about it and said, because you are the purest person I have ever met. Although the best swordsman in the world is also a master of swordsmanship, a great swordsman and so on will be completely out of the question in the future, and even the best swordsman in the world may not be him. However, what he pursues is the ambition of being the best swordsman in the world. Although he can hone pure and powerful swordsmanship, he is filled with a layer of utilitarianism. It's not that this is bad, but it can promote his slashing without any hesitation. But compared with Dashki, it is still one level behind. In terms of her pure pursuit of swordsmanship, Dashki was definitely the first person Luogu met. 35xs. However, this purity has not been truly utilized by you. Luogu thought about his words as he spoke. This is very important. If the meaning changes at the slightest deviation, Dashki may go all the way in an unknown direction. Therefore, after thinking for a while, he said, the determination to pursue swordsmanship is pure, and so is the obsession with swordsmanship. However, when you use it, the confusion in your heart forms a fog and becomes a trap in your hands, a chain of sharp blades. When you were on the ship, when you attacked the unlucky combination, you used the back of the knife. The moment you took action, what you were thinking about was that you couldn't kill them. Or, there were many others. Content, other details. Dashki listened very carefully. When he heard this, he couldn't help but nodded and said, I always feel that they should be useful. That's the problem. You're thinking too much. You're hesitating. How can a sword be sharp? Luogu drew his sword casually, and the blade flashed, and a big tree on one side was split into two diagonally in an instant. Only by slashing without hesitation can you unleash all the power you have cultivated so hard. Feeling confused, the blade will become dull. Dashki frowned, and after much hesitation, he considered and said, should I kill all the people in front of me without any distracting thoughts? Can you accept this kind of thing? Luogu asked. Dashki shook his head, I can't do it without asking for any reason. Luogu nodded, that's not the case. Huh, Dashki was confused. Why? Swordsmanship and faith are often inseparable. Only by fulfilling the wish in the heart with the sword in the hand can it be called the unity of man and sword. On the contrary, being kind-hearted but ruthless will ultimately go against what is in the heart. Over time, your swordsmanship will deteriorate. What will increase is just your killing skills. Luogu said, if you want to sprint to a higher level, if you want to improve your swordsmanship bravely and diligently, you can't hesitate. What doesn't hesitate is not the determination to kill, but the perseverance to carry out everything faith. Well, can you understand what I say? These words were convoluted, but Dashki, who stopped along the way and thought seriously, gradually understood. The most important thing is the reason why I draw my sword. Dashki said seriously, the reason for drawing the sword is not the reason for drawing the sword at that moment when fighting a certain enemy. It is that it has supported me along the way and can penetrate all of my life reasons for swordsmanship and belief. I think I can probably understand what you mean. Luogu breathed a long sigh of relief. Very good, then, the most important question is, why did you draw your sword? For justice. Dashki looked at Luogu with hesitation. As a navy, it is natural to pursue justice, Luogu said, but is that your pursuit? Is it the belief and dream that you desire with all your heart and hope that you can achieve it with the cold blade in your hand? Dashki fell into silence. Silence was not hesitation, but confusion. After a long time, she looked at Luogu. I don't know what's wrong with me. I should obviously implement my justice, but I can't say it frankly. This desire but not getting it is clearly on the lips, but it is still timid. It is a person's extremely complicated thoughts, and it includes the rebellion in the subconscious. He is unwilling to deceive himself, but he is even more unwilling to deny himself. Luogu couldn't help but look at Dashki deeply. Maybe it's just because you are confused about the justice you insist on now. As if being struck by lightning, Dashki faintly felt that something in his heart seemed to be completely shattered by this sentence. Justice is confusing. Why am I confused about the justice that the Navy has always implemented? Dashki asked Luogu. Luogu shook his head. This kind of question cannot be answered by others. You need to ask yourself and ask your own heart. And before you get the answer, I think that any other means will not be enough to truly improve your performance. You yourself, at best, are just like what you said, an external object. Pirate's bounty, don't run away. Author, The Desolate Little Purity. Chapter 112. In the jungle, the wind is very quiet. Luogu and Dashki stood opposite each other, silent. After a while, Luogu spread his hands and said, I'm sorry, I don't seem to have helped you much. No. Dashki immediately shook his head. In fact, your words are exactly what I need most at the moment. It turns out that I don't know when I had such a huge confusion in my heart. No, maybe from the beginning, this confusion has always been hidden deep in my heart. When I slashed at the enemy with my sword, I was always confused in my heart, but I never thought about where this confusion came from. She looked at Luogu. Perhaps, I have had a similar confusion since the beginning? I yearned for justice, so I joined the Navy. But I have never really faced up to what justice is. With this kind of fighting with my mood is indeed not enough. Your words allowed me to open up my heart and find the thorns that hindered my progress. Using this as a guide, I have enough confidence to overcome such obstacles and set foot on things I have never touched before. Field. So, I'm really grateful. Dashki bowed 90 degrees with a serious look on his face. Luogu scratched his eyebrows, and then smiled. That's good, Dashki, you impressed me. So, next is about the devil fruit. What kind of devil fruit are you eating? Well, it's probably the susu fruit. Dashki was actually not very sure, and smiled a little shyly. After all, I was drunk at the time. 35xs. Luogu was speechless for a moment. I heard Dashki say, however, after that, I probably understood. The ability of this fruit is speed. Although it cannot be said that it affects the whole body, at least the speed of the limbs can be increased. This also includes movement. Speed and attack speed. What I can currently do is move at about 5 times speed, which can increase my original movement speed by 5 times, but the physical consumption will not be increased to 5 times. Although it is more strenuous than the original, it is not obviously. But this is what the legs can do, but the speed of the arms is a bit worse, only 3 times the original. In addition, other abilities need to be rediscovered. But, Captain, I still want to concentrate on regarding swordsmanship and devil fruit abilities. I think it is enough as a support. I see Luogu nodded. If you eat the devil fruit, the power will naturally belong to you. As for how you use this power, it has nothing to do with me. However, 5 times the speed is obviously not your limit. Before your swordsmanship has improved, this may be the only way to improve your combat power. Dashki, remember, speed is power. Last night, Cindy Lal said that your power is too light. Maybe it's just because your speed is still not fast enough. Isn't it fast enough? Dashki thought thoughtfully, then nodded and said, users with devil fruit abilities are basically malleable. The fruit's abilities are unlimited. If you focus on development, maybe the speed will increase again, and it's not impossible. I will try my best to do it. That's fine. Net. Looking at the sky above his head, Luogu said, it's time to go back. I don't know if Mishita is back. In terms of time, we should still be on our way back. Dashki said, Captain, what should we do next? Well, let's wait until night to make money. During the day, Luogu said with a smile, let's go investigate something. What Luogu wants to investigate is actually about Halustone. Mogu Town can be regarded as a place with hidden dragons and crouching tigers, and there may not be anyone who can process Halustone. It's just that it would be difficult to get results by casually asking about this kind of thing. After many investigations, Luogu settled on a direction. I decided to wait until almost all the valuable pirates here have been captured, and then ask this person to come and help with the secondary processing of the prison in the pirate hunter's big ship. When they returned to the hotel, they saw Mishita sitting in the room holding the note Luogu left for her, waiting boredly. In the next few days, Luogu and his party spent all day and night. Every night, I would go to the tavern and take action if there were suitable and valuable pirates. If the value is too low and has no features, then go back to sleep. If he really couldn't sleep during the day, Luogu would take Dashki and Mishita shopping. After all, as a woman, clothes are indispensable. As a woman who planned to become a partner with a sword, Dashki originally had no special requirements for things like clothes. After all, a plaid half-sleeved shirt can be worn by a woman from Rogue Town to the Grand Line. There is obviously something lacking in this aspect. But Mishita is a good shopper. She has unique insights into choosing clothes. Under her influence, Dashki's dressing has gradually become more fashionable. I don't know whether this is a positive impact or a negative impact. Luogu was happy to see this happen, at least with these two people dangling in front of him, his eyes wouldn't be too painful. But he also realized one thing: why did you find 2 crew members, both of whom were women? That is to say, Robin did not get on the ship, but instead became a cooperative relationship. If this woman also got on the ship, wouldn't it become a situation where yin and yang are declining? In the future, the reputation of the pirate hunter Narasragu will be established. When people look at this pirate hunter, wouldn't they suspect some shortcomings in this guy's character? However, it seems that it can also have some confusing effects, right? Luogu shook his head, not particularly concerned about this. Then that night, Luogu brought 2 people to the bar as usual, but it was on the second floor of the bar. There is a small casino here. It is called a casino, but it is actually just a few tables. A group of boring and dangerous pirates play cards here. Sometimes the bet is Bailey, and sometimes the bet is human life. Why? Because Bailey is gone, the gambler's mentality is unwilling to give in. He slaps his hand on the table. If you win, I will cut it for you. The other party doesn't want to. That means you don't have the courage. If you don't have the courage, do you dare to go to the sea and become a pirate? Simply ridiculous. Of course, you can't be unwilling. After going back and forth, there was a falling out, and in the end, of course, force had to be used to speak out. It was normal for there to be casualties during the process. Luogu has been playing here for several days, trying to make some money to supplement his living expenses. He has already earned more than 30 sets of clothes for Dashki and Mishita, which Luogu had never thought of before. He never expected that when he came to Magic Valley Town, what he gained the most during this trip was not Bailey or pirates, but clothes. Most importantly, he had none of his own. When he came to the table and sat down, a glass of wine was delivered to him. Luogu knocked on the table, "Come here." Everyone shunned him, no one wanted to play with him. "I've been playing for several days and I haven't lost a single time. I think it's a trick, but there's no evidence." No one likes an opponent who tries to use force and is beaten instantly. Just as Luogu was feeling disappointed, a person suddenly sat down opposite him. Smiling slightly, "I'll play with you." You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Pirate's Bounty, Don't Run Away. Author, The Desolate Little Purity. Chapter 113. Looking up, Luogu glanced at this man. Ned. He has a long face, with long gray-white hair under a hairband, tied in dreadlocks. When he smiles, he reveals a mouthful of rotten teeth. Wanted order. Rocio. 42 million Baileys. Qualified for arrest. Big fish. A smile appeared at the corner of Luogu's mouth. Who are you? Is this kind of thing very important? Rocio sat down and said, or do the people who bet with you need a specific identity? For example, some small pirates who only have a bounty of 2 million. Luogu chuckled, no, this has nothing to do with the bounty. Who knows? Rocio shook his head, do you want to play? Okay. Luogu placed the cards on the plate in the middle, shuffle the cards. Okay, Rocio said while shuffling the cards, you have been very eye-catching recently. People who can shine are easily observed no matter where they are. Luogu picked up the wine glass and took a sip, especially people like me. It's an undeniable argument. A cold smile appeared at the corner of Rocio's mouth. However, such an eye-catching newcomer was not noticed until after arriving in Demon Valley Town. This is not, very is it weird? Maybe. Luogu sighed, the East China Sea is a small place, and there is no stage for me to show my skills. 35xs. It wasn't until I arrived at the Grand Line that I realized that there are so many villains in this world. Do you think it's the same? Something exciting. The cards had been shuffled, and Rocio put them on the table, made a please gesture to Luogu, and then said with a smile, yeah, it's very exciting. But if you let me know, you besides your current identity, there are other hidden things, so, you must be careful. Glancing around, Luogu asked, what are you careful about? There have been several guys who have been staring at you recently, but they have disappeared inexplicably. Rocio took a look at Luogu after he dealt the cards, and said with a smile, their men can hardly hold it anymore. So, Luogu stared at the cards for a while, then took out one and placed it on the table. The person who was staring at me disappeared. What are their subordinates planning to do? Such a thing, if you are not careful, it will make people very excited. If you're excited, It might be too early. Roshio put the cards in his hand on the table. I seem to have won. Luogu shook his head indifferently and threw the cards in his hand into the pile. You are really extraordinary. They all say I'm abnormal. Roshio looked at Luogu. What do you think? You. Luogu looked at him and smiled. Normal, very normal. The two of them stopped talking and concentrated on playing cards. There was a mutual victory and defeat until late at night, when the two of them gave up and counted their gambling money, and found that there was not much change. Luogu stood up bored and yawned. It's so boring. After clearing the things on the table, he turned around and went downstairs. Are you planning to leave just like that? Rosio's voice came from behind. Mishita and Dashki, who were sitting on the counter holding wine glasses and watching the scene, stood up at the same time. Luogu waved his hand to tell them to calm down, turned around and smiled. What else? Aren't you going to pay something for wasting my time all night? Rosio stood up from the chair. His tall figure was much taller than Luogu. He looked at Luogu with a condescending look. Are you kidding me? Luogu sighed. He really felt worried. If possible, he really didn't want to attack Roshio directly in this place. Such a big fish must wait until the right time to catch it in one fell swoop to be fun without causing too many sequelae. In front of everyone, although you can defeat him, you can't create a new high for your own income. Such a fight is very boring. But it's a pity that looking at the current situation, even if you don't want to take action, I'm afraid it won't work. Reaching out to hold the handle of the knife, Luogu's eyes gradually became cold and stern. Rosio's pupils suddenly shrank. Although Luogu's momentum had not yet reached its peak, a sense of danger had already enveloped him, and he felt a little regretful. Although his character is somewhat abnormal, he is a real danger. But this does not mean that he is an idiot. It is definitely an unwise choice to provoke someone who is obviously more powerful than him. But now, the arrow is on the string and must be fired. What's going on here? Just as Rocio was advancing and retreating, a voice came to everyone's ears. A group of people came to the stairs, including both men and women. The leader was a dark-skinned, muscular man with a wanton and arrogant smile on his face all the time. A big tongue was thrown on his face, and he didn't know how he did it. He could almost lick his own nose. His sinister, yet obviously bright eyes scanned the faces of everyone present one by one, and then burst into laughter. It seems very interesting. Wanted order. Bellamy. 55 million Baileys. Qualified for arrest. Luogu couldn't hold it back and was happy. Very happy. One Bellamy and one Rocio, these two people together are worth million less. Coupled with those caught before, the harvest from this trip to Magic Valley Town is very good. After scratching his head, Luogu asked, are you coming to fight? Bellamy was stunned. What do you mean? Fight and then let yourself come too? Who to hit? But Rocio was furious in an instant. Just one Luogu was so dangerous that it made people feel as if their bones were freezing. With the addition of a guy who didn't know the depth, the situation was not good for him. Moreover, these two people obviously knew each other and wanted to practice against him. Otherwise, why would you ask him to fight together? At this moment, after various possibilities converged in my mind, there was only one conclusion: strike first to gain the upper hand. Take out your gun and shoot. Target, Bellamy. Who told Bellamy to focus all his attention on Luogu at this time? This kind of opponent is the easiest to sneak attack on. The moment the gunfire suddenly rang out, Bellamy had already reacted. His legs suddenly pressed down, and in just a flash, he disappeared from the place without a trace. Several projectiles hit the floor on the side. Rocio looked up suddenly and saw Bellamy squatting on the roof, pressing the beam with both hands, grinning, and asked with a ferocious face, "You, bastard, do you want to die?" The moment the voice fell, the whole person was like a gust of wind, heading straight for Roshio. Luogu looked a little confused and couldn't help but mutter in a low voice, "Didn't I ask you to fight me together? Why did you turn around and start fighting yourself?" Pirate's Bounty Don't Run Away. Author, The Desolate Little Purity. Chapter 114. Rogu made up his mind when he saw Bellamy. The trip to Magic Valley Town ended perfectly. Overall, the harvest can be considered quite considerable. Especially the two big fish, Bellamy and Roshio, are enough to make up for the time spent in Magic Valley Town. Therefore, Luogu did not intend to continue to hide his identity, and decided to directly take down these two people. But who would have thought that Roshio was thinking too much at this moment? So much so that Bellamy started fighting with Roshio before he could figure anything out. These two people can have such a high bounty, naturally they are not ordinary people. Suddenly, it was very lively. Dashiki and Makita both came to Rogu's side, watching Bellamy's subordinates vigilantly. However, this group of people seemed to have a lot of confidence in Bellamy. They found a place to sit down at random, drank when they should drink, chatted when they should, and almost didn't even look at the two people who were fighting vigorously over there. Now, what's going on? Daisuke felt a little unbelievable. Why did it become like this? Luogu thought for a moment and said, "This is probably the power of language." Language? Dashiki and Mishita looked at Luogu together, and Luogu waved his hand, "Whatever, just take your time and watch." I turned around and came to the bar to order another glass of wine, watching while drinking. To be honest, since I went to sea, there have been a lot of fights. But this was the first time I watched other people fight. These two are fighting fiercely, and their attack methods are also very interesting. Although the attack power is really not up to the table in Luogu's opinion, Luogu still enjoys watching it and admires it. In the end, Roshiachi missed a move, and Bellamy pushed him to the ground and gave him a hard hammer. He couldn't take care of himself when he was about to be beaten. When blood spurted on Bellamy's face, Bellamy stopped and was already full. It was the bloody fist that stood up. "How dare you sneak attack me?" After finishing speaking, he stood up, walked up to Luogu, snatched the wine that Luogu had not finished drinking, drew the gun with his backhand, and pulled the trigger at Roshio. But at this moment, his wrist tightened, and the muzzle of the gun involuntarily went upwards, hitting the ceiling with a single shot. Bellamy looked gloomy at the man who grabbed her wrist. Luogu smiled, "Fight is a fight, don't kill anyone." "Are you together?" Bellamy's face was gloomy. Looking back, if you hadn't talked to me, he might not have attacked me. Luogu smiled and said, "Look at the two sentences before and after you. When they are connected together, do they speak human language?" Bellamy thought about it carefully, and there seemed to be something wrong. Since they were in a group, why did they attack themselves just because they talked to them? On the contrary, if these two people were opponents, Luogu's words would be misleading. Thinking of this, his face became even more gloomy. "You are using me? Well, if you want to think so, there's nothing wrong with it," he said, letting go of Bellamy's wrist and coming to Roshio. "This guy has completely lost consciousness, and his entire face is almost invisible. This misery is even more unlucky than the original work." Speaking of which, in the original work, Bellamy simply launched a sneak attack. After the sneak attack succeeded, Roshio instantly lost his combat effectiveness. But there is no such fierce battle. In this case, you still have to be grateful to me, at least I gave you a chance. Rogu smiled and patted Bellamy's chest. "Tip pops up?" Luogu breathed a sigh of relief. He was still a little worried about whether he could catch the pirates defeated by others. Now it seems that there is no setting that you have to defeat yourself to be able to capture it. Voidborn chains. After a burst of chirping noises, Roshio was tied tightly. Successfully captured the executioner Roshio and received a bounty of 42 million Baileys and 1 black iron coin. After doing this, Luogu looked back at Bellamy and grinned, "It's your turn." Bellamy looked at the chains that bound Ratio, and seemed to be taken aback. It wasn't until Luogu said this that he came back to his senses and his expression became even more gloomy. "I have heard of this method. I heard that some time ago, a pirate hunter came to the devil without knowing it. Town captured 2 pirates. Later, they died on the Grand Line. Because no one has seen this pirate hunter since then. And the method he used to capture the 2 pirates was exactly they used chains that come out of nowhere to tie people up." "Is there such a statement?" Luogu was also surprised, and then shook his head. "It's really too much to say that someone else is dead without any evidence." "Humph, now it seems that you are not dead, and it's not that no one has seen you. It's just that no one would have thought that a pirate hunter would disguise himself as a pirate and lurk in Magic Valley Town." Bellamy looked at Luogu, his expression gradually exaggerated, "But now all this is about to end, pirate hunter Noros Luogu. Although your reputation is not very big yet, it is enough to become my stepping stone." "Oh," Luogu smiled, So, Bellamy squatted down with both legs. His calves had all turned into springs and were compressed to the extreme. "I'm going to kill you." The figure is like a spring, and it is ejected. Surrounded by a powerful force, a majestic wind blew up, and in just a moment, he had already arrived in front of Luogu. Luogu had a strange expression, as if he wanted to draw the sword, but gave up again, and then he stretched out a hand. "You want to resist my attack with just one hand? Pirate hunter, your biggest failure is that you can't see your own strength." "Spring, sniper." Snapped. Rogu put his hand on Bellamy's head. All the power came to an abrupt end here, and the huge kinetic energy driven by inertia was like colliding with an invisible wall. There was nowhere to vent it, and finally it could only explode on the spot, and the ground was crushed by this force with a click. Luogu grinned, "Sure enough." Sure enough, he didn't say anything, but grabbed Bellamy's head and pressed it to the ground with a groan. Bang! A loud noise echoed in all directions, with Bellamy's head as the center. The wooden floor on the ground cracked and crumbled, and sawdust flew all over the sky. Bellamy's head was sunk into the floor, but his legs were raised high, still not hanging down. Luogu let go of his hand, stood up, and hooked his fingers at Bellamy, who was lying on the ground. "Come on." With a bang, Bellamy's legs fell to the ground and she completely lost consciousness. "Well, you can't come." Luogu sighed, squatted down, and tied him up. Pirate's Bounty Don't Run Away. Author, The Desolate Little Purity. Chapter 115. Holding Rocio with one hand and Bellamy with the other, they threw them in front of Dashiki and Makita with a little force. "Let's go." Luogu clapped his hands. The 2 women were also familiar with this. They carried the 2 on their shoulders neatly, and turned to leave. There was no sound on the 2nd floor of the bar, and there was no doubt about everything at present. Ratio was known to most people, an existence they could not afford to provoke. Bellamy was able to defeat Ratio, and of course they couldn't afford to offend him. And now this person could knock Bellamy unconscious with one blow. Of course, they would not dare to mess with such a player. Whether he is a pirate hunter or not, it doesn't matter. What's important is that if they charge forward even though they can't defeat him in the first place, wouldn't that be giving food to the pirate hunter? Speaking of which, what they should do most now is not to bury their heads in their crotches and let Luogu treat them as non-existent transparent people. There is a tacit understanding, they all lower their heads, or drink, or look around, whether it's the window, the starry sky outside, or the floor under their feet. Anyway, just don't collide with that man's eyes. Luogu scanned the crowd, feeling a little bored. He curled his lips and was about to leave when he suddenly heard a voice saying, "Wait a minute." Everyone immediately glared at the speaker. The god of plague is finally leaving. "Are you calling people back again to kill everyone?" Luogu looked back when he heard this, and his eyes suddenly lit up, is something wrong? Of course the person who spoke was not a pretty girl, but a coquettishly dressed man. The reason why Logogu's eyes lit up was mainly because he missed it just now. There is actually a big pirate here worth million. The name is Sarkis. Logogu immediately showed a beautiful smile. Excuse me, are you okay? Sarkis shivered subconsciously. In his imagination, Rogu should have such an expression. He should have a more ferocious face, treating pirates as if they were his own money bag. What's going on with this friendly expression from the neighbor uncle now? Patting his face, Sakis quickly calmed down, then took a deep breath and said, I think you should put Bellamy down. Oh, Logogu found it interesting and asked, give me a reason. The reason is. Sakis glanced at Bellamy, who was completely unconscious, and mustered up the courage to speak, your identity has been exposed. The pirates here wanted to tear Sakis alive. This sentence is simply too dangerous. Exposed identity means crisis. And these people present all know this fact. What will be the result? When this guy said this, did he use his brain? Oh, and then, Logogu found a place to sit down with great interest. Anyway, his identity had been exposed, so he said so. He took off the glasses, threw them aside, and snapped his fingers at the bartender. The bartender brought the best wine without saying a word. After just one sip, I knew that this stuff was completely different from what I usually drink. He pointed and said to the bartender, you are dishonest. What you usually drink is not always watered down, right? The bartender laughed dryly and dared not speak. Sakis over there couldn't help but said, the exposure of your identity means that as long as you go out from here, these people will directly spread this matter to the entire Demon Valley town. And you want to escape from here unscathed, it shouldn't be that easy, right? But you never said it had anything to do with the release of Bellamy. Logogu spread his hands and said, I'll give you another chance to say one sentence. If you can't tell the whole story in one sentence, then you will lose all opportunities to communicate with me. Bellamy can help you kill them all. Your identity will not be exposed. You are still the new pirate from the East China Sea, not the pirate hunter Noros Rogu. After Sakis finished these words in one breath, he added, if you don't kill them, you probably don't want your hands to be filled with the blood of these weaklings. It doesn't matter. We can help with such dirty work, just do it. Murderous look. Not from Rogu, but from all the pirates in the whole bar. And this murderous intent was not directed at Logogu, but rather at Sakis. Logogu glanced at these people and couldn't help but smile. If I reject you, I'm afraid you will be torn to pieces by these guys, right? You dare to say such things, you are working too hard. What's your answer? Having said that, Sarkis is not afraid of anything anymore. It would be too petty to be afraid after talking to this level. Logogu sighed, so, you have to stand on the same ground as your captain no matter what. Sakis was stunned, looked at the pirates around him, and immediately understood what Logogu meant, and then nodded and said, I will assist the captain in this matter, so I will definitely stand on the same stand as the captain. That's good. After saying this, Logogu stretched out the iron rod on his body, waved it in his hand, and then grinned at Sakis, since you are so persistent, let's do it together. Sarkis's pupils constricted, and he already knew something was wrong, so he reached out and tried to draw the knife, but just as his fingertips touched the handle, he heard a bad wind above his head, and when he looked up, he saw an iron rod falling from the sky. Boom! There was a muffled sound and he knew nothing. After tying up this pirate worth million, Logogu carried it on his shoulders, glanced at the pirates in the bar, and grinned, do you think I should kill them all, woolen cloth? No one said anything. It's just that some people's legs have begun to tremble uncontrollably. How strong Sarkis was, he was lying down before he had time to show it. Rogu stunned Bellamy with one slap, and Sarkis with one blow. His strength was so strong that he didn't need a second hit. They asked themselves that no one could resist such a method. If Luogu really wanted to kill people, then they really had no choice but to kill them. If you say you're not afraid, that's a lie. But suddenly he heard Luogu's laughter again. You're kidding, don't be so nervous. How could I possibly do something like murder and silence? Everyone, you must remember that Noro's Luogu is a pirate, a hunter, but a gentle pirate hunter. If you meet me at sea in the future and I must catch you, then don't resist. I will never kill you if you don't resist, really. This is a guarantee from Noro's Rogu. Those who resist will be killed, and those who do not resist, live. That's all. Farewell. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Pirate's Bounty, Don't Run Away. Author, The Desolate Little Purity. Chapter 116. Luogu and his party, under the watchful eyes of the pirates, left the tavern swaggeringly, went deep into the night, and disappeared in a blink of an eye. None of the pirates came out to pursue them. It wasn't until they were sure that Luogu and the others were gone that they breathed a sigh of relief. Then everyone looked at each other. How to do? What to do next? Should we publicize Luogu's incident, or should we remain silent? Everyone, you look at me, I look at you, and finally everyone is silent. They don't dare to say anything. At least at this stage, they don't dare to say anything. Being frightened by a pirate hunter is an incredible shame for the pirates, but in the face of absolute power, all the shame is nothing. In the end, it was nothing more than that, and they all left. And Luogu and his party did not continue to return to the hotel, but returned directly to the boat. On the way, Dashki asked, "Are we leaving like this?" "Of course not," Luogu replied, "I will go back to the ship to rest for the night. Tomorrow I have to go to the town to find craftsmen to repair the prison. The sea tower stone cage is so big that it is not a problem to put it on the deck every day. Waiting for the craftsmen after the work is done, we will set sail again." Dashki nodded. "It's a pity that we didn't catch them all. There's no way, after all, the ship can't support so many people." Mishita ran and counted with her fingers, 1, 2, 3, many, many people. They eat on the ship every day. How many supplies do we need to be able to supply these people? Guys, the next town is still far away, and we don't even know if there is a navy. If these guys can't get rid of them, there is no way to exchange them for bounties. Instead, the money to support them will continue to be consumed. Daisuke also understood this truth, so she just sighed and didn't struggle with anything. Instead, I began to care about another question: why would the Navy tolerate a place like Demon Valley Town? I have been deeply puzzled by this since the first day here. Luogu's answer to her at that time was that it's better to block it than to open it up. After a few days, she still doesn't understand why dealing with pirates is so complicated. Mishita could not answer this question, and Luogu also shook his head and said nothing. It's normal to have different ways of dealing with things, but for some pure-minded people, it's especially easy to fall into a dead end. No matter how much the Navy insists on justice, it is an indisputable fact that a place known to many people, a paradise for pirates, just appeared on the great route so majestically. Why can it be tolerated? Dashiki couldn't figure it out. Just as Daisuke was puzzled, everyone returned to the boat. After throwing the person in his hand into the lower prison, they went back to rest without mentioning it. Early the next morning, after eating the breakfast prepared by Makita, Luogu went to Demon Valley Town alone. The reason why I didn't bring Dashiki and Makita with me was because the situation was unclear. After all, my identity was exposed yesterday. If the Devil Valley Town has made all the preparations now, I have no problem, but the two of them might still be together. In danger. From another point of view, they also need to let them watch the ship. After all, the possibility of the pirates finding this place cannot be completely ruled out. So, in the end, the two of them stayed, and Luogu entered Magic Valley town, looking for craftsmen. Finding someone, negotiating money, and finally reaching an agreement, this craftsman is easier to persuade than Luogu imagined. According to his words, living in this town, he has seen all kinds of people. For him, the most important thing is not who he works for, but how much money he can make after finishing the work. Luogu understood this point very well, and almost made him his confidant. When I walked out of the craftsman's workshop, it was already noon. Devil Valley town is still so disharmonious, all kinds of killings and scrambles can be seen everywhere, and all kinds of pirates are walking on the street swaggeringly, or yelling, or making hideous expressions at passers-by to show threats. Luogu looked at these pirates and smiled from the bottom of his heart. If conditions permit, I really hope to stay here for a while. Unfortunately, the prison on the ship is close to capacity. The amount of materials that can be accommodated determines that he cannot continue to arrest people here. After making an agreement with the craftsman to meet outside Mogu town, Luogu started his purchasing work again. It is worth mentioning that the people in the town did not show any special emotions towards him. From this point of view, it was probably because the pirates were really tight-lipped about their situation last night. That's really rare. Luogu murmured in a low voice, but suddenly heard a voice behind him, "Eat, eat, meat." The single speech pattern seems to expose the speaker's single-threaded brain. Most importantly, why does this voice and speaking pattern feel so familiar? I glanced back subconsciously, and then I saw a straw hat. I go. Luogu was stunned. Luffy. He has actually arrived at Magic Valley town. The green algae head following him is none other than Zoro, the world's most insane person. Also, behind the two of them was a girl named Nami. I didn't expect it. I thought I had already left when they came here. Luogu threw the things in his hands onto the cart and touched his chin. It's still a small green fruit. He also saw Luffy's current bounty amount, and he didn't know what this kid had done. The amount now reached million. Although it is expensive, at this time, he should have reached million. But whether it is million or million, compared with his future, the present can only be regarded as a small fruit. Therefore, Luogu shook his head. It's better to continue waiting for you to grow up. Pushing the cart, turned around and left. Zoro, who was in Luffy's party, suddenly stopped, looked back suspiciously, and could only see the back of Roga leaving, but he couldn't be sure. "What's wrong, Zoro?" Luffy stopped and asked. Zoro shook his head. "It's nothing. Maybe I felt wrong. Someone seemed to be watching us just now." "Forget it, I heard that that person has also been here. In addition to the news about Sky Island, I mainly want to find out about that person." Nami said, "It's just that when I meet him, I don't know whether I should say hello or not." "Say hello." Zoro shook his head. "Let's forget it. After all, the other party is a pirate hunter, but I heard that he also uses a sword." "Meat, meat." Luffy didn't care what they said, he shouted, "I want to eat." The group left in such a noisy manner. Pirate's Bounty Don't Run Away. Author, The Desolate Little Purity. Chapter 117. In order not to meet Luffy in advance, Rogu simply changed direction and continued to act. Looking at the car, some of the missing things have been completed. Of course, a pallet truck does not actually have such a large loading capacity. The main reason is that in the past few days, when Makita returned to the ship to feed the prisoners, she had already sent back the supplies needed on the ship in batches. Luogu just came here today to purchase some forgotten things such as black tea and wine unique to this town. Pushing the fully loaded cart, Luogu quickly forgot about the encounter with Luffy. But the thinking caused by this cannot be stopped. If Luffy has already appeared in this town, then another group of people should be here too. As he pushed the cart forward, Luogu looked around, but he didn't see any familiar faces. Mogu Town is not big or small, and it is true that you can't touch it if you touch it. Then if these people really come, what does it mean to me? Scratching his head, the group of people he was thinking of was none other than the one who met Luffy for the first time in Demon Valley Town and who would have a huge impact on the world's situation in the future, Marshall D. Teach. Of course, he also has a simple nickname, Blackbeard. Thinking of this person, as a bounty hunter, you have to think about this person's future bounty. That's a terrifying number of 22 billion. What does that mean? It means that just catching this person is worth 2 gold coins, and giving it to the Navy and adding 2 more coins is almost half a diamond coin. Terrible, terrible. Luogu muttered in a low voice, I just don't know how much this guy's bounty is now. Well, it should be at least 6 to 7 billion, right? Speaking of which, before the war, this guy was to this world, almost all of them are unknown. That's not right. After he captured Fire Fist Ace, he has already earned a huge reputation and won the title of King Shishibukai. Hey, if I weren't a pirate hunter, I would have captured K. It's a pity that Lockdale can also have such a name. This thing doesn't mean much to me, after all, I don't intend to do legal robbery or anything like that. After all kinds of thoughts gathered in his mind, he felt that the depth of his thoughts began to deviate from the original core. Then he looked around and said, where is this? Lost in thought, I forgot my surroundings for a moment and actually got lost. Could it be that Sauron's poison is such that as long as you see this person, the stray virus will spread throughout your body along the line of sight? He grinned, it's terrible. He was looking around, looking for familiar buildings, and he believed that with the ability to hang out around here recently, he would be able to find the place agreed with the craftsman soon. Then I saw a man with a thick waist, thin legs, and uncoordinated up and down. This man is tall and has a fat face. Although his legs are too thin, which makes people feel slightly worried, it does not affect the strength of his upper body. He was heading towards Rogu, and as he walked, he stuffed a whole piece of fruit pie into his mouth, and his mouth was full of jam. And when Luogu looked at this person felt something for an instant, and suddenly raised his eyes to collide with Luogu's. Just one glance. The eyes of the two collided for just a moment, and both of them stopped at the same time. Invisibly, there seemed to be innumerable strands of thread, coiled and entangled, and finally turned into a sealed prison, locking the position of the two people, but pulling a huge circle. Isolate everyone except the two of them. In the haze, the extreme darkness danced like a flame behind the back of the person opposite, his feet stepped on the dark flame, his eyes were as bright as a dragon. At the same time, behind Luogu, there was a crescent moon, which floated up between the primordial mists, and the fierce sword's power spread freely. The moonlight was hazy, but it was as hazy as a sword, and the sword's power was extremely heavy. However, Luogu's pupils expanded in an instant. After an interval of about 1/10 of a second, his pupils contracted again and returned to their original shape, and then he pushed his cart and took a step forward. Slam! In the air, something seemed to break instantly. The men opposite took steps at the same time, and all the scenes in the hazy fantasy were suddenly fragmented by the movements of the two men. In the end, a pushcart continued to move in its original direction. The other one, while eating fruit pie, walked in the direction he had already decided to go. Approaching, meeting, and finally separating again. It wasn't until after walking a long way that the man stopped his footsteps and turned his head to look in the direction Luogu was going. Luogu's back could no longer be seen there. The man grabbed the fruit pie in his hand into a ball and stuffed it directly into his mouth. He bit hard and the jam exploded along the gaps in the corners of his mouth. When, on this sea, such a terrifying swordsman, pirate, or navy appeared again. Shaking his head, it's really a pity for a guy who has no reputation. However, there should always be a battle in the future. As he thought, he turned around and continued on his unfinished journey. On the other side, Luogu's brows were furrowed, his face was very troubled. It wasn't because the other party's strength made him unexpected, and it wasn't because of the chain reaction triggered by the collision of eyes just now. The only question he had was, why is there no bounty? Counting the entire group of people in Magic Valley Town, there is no one whose image fits Blackbeard's image better than this guy. Therefore, Luogu can be almost % sure that the person who passed by him just now must be the person named Blackbeard. If it were him, it would be natural for him to be powerful. However, such a powerful pirate is missing the most important thing he should have. 4 lines of words. Because there is no bounty, there is no bounty. Luogu smacked his lips. Although the logic is very smooth, but wasn't this guy still a member of Whitebeard's crew before this? At least give him a few thousand. Still. He said that after betraying Whitebeard, he no longer even had a basic identity as a pirate, and in the end, he didn't even have a bounty. Without a bounty, there is no value in selling. And if you want to make a move, now may be an absolutely good time. After all, there is an ace chasing and fighting behind this guy, and he has not yet obtained the ability to shake the fruit. As long as the opportunity is used properly and with Ace's help, whether willing or not, this guy should be able to be easily taken down. But he has no bounty. This made Luogu lose the meaning of attacking him. Pirate's bounty don't run away. Author, The Desolate Little Purity. Chapter 118. But. As Luogu walked, he was thinking about the conspiracy in his mind. Blackbeard has no bounty, but neither do his crew members. Finally, Fire Fist Ace has such a thing as a bounty, right? Thinking of this, he suddenly stood still and looked up at the sky. Eyes the Fire Fist. I always feel that as a fan of the original novel, it doesn't matter whether I'm a real fan or a fake fan. The important thing is that I have also read the article on war. The image of Ace being punched through by Akainu can't be dispelled for a long time in his mind, and Shikaku has never been in his eyes. Really, do you want to arrest this guy in exchange for a bounty of million? After pondering for a moment, he looked at his hands and said, no, that's wrong. It's not 500 million, it's 1 billion. It's million to catch it, and another million can be earned by handing it over to the Navy. 1 billion inside and out, the price of a gold coin. The question before us now is whether to do it or not. Break the reserve and self of a pirate fan deep in my heart, completely immerse myself in the identity of a pirate hunter, only seek profit, and improve my strength as the first criterion. Still, maintain the basic qualities of a pirate fan, save Ace in water and fire. Luogu scratched his head. He felt that even if he really didn't try to catch Ace, he couldn't go to the top to fight for Ace and make a fool of himself. If he goes, his only target can only be Whitebeard. So, there's actually nothing worth thinking about. Luogu pushed the cart and walked out of the town. Whether it's Ace or Blackbeard, as a pirate hunter, I can't let them go. However, you still have to think carefully about what can be done during this period. Ace, After arriving at the place agreed with the craftsman, take the craftsman to the big ship of the pirate hunter. There were no twists and turns along the way. When they arrived at the place, Makita and Dashiki were asked to come down to move things. Luogu took the craftsman to the gabion of Halu and asked him to help break it down. After careful inspection, the craftsman said that there is no problem in dismantling Halushi's cage, but it is a bit difficult for him to transform the prison cell. On the one hand, there are no suitable tools here, and large equipment can only be used in workshops. It doesn't matter whether Luogu's boat can be taken over, even if they can, the craftsmen are not willing to let them go. Although it doesn't matter who he works for, the craftsman has lived in this Demon Valley town for such a long time and has no intention of ruining his job just for a business. After all, it is a paradise for pirates. If word gets out that he repairs ships for pirate hunters and also serves as a prison for guarding pirates, he will not be able to survive. Luogu didn't want to drive the boat there either, it was too ostentatious. Looking back, it's hard to say whether the pirates were besieging or not. The main reason was that Luogu was worried that he couldn't help attacking them, and the boat couldn't hold so many people. All in all, the final agreement with the craftsman was that the cages would be broken down into materials on board and the work would be over. After that, the transformation work can be done elsewhere. In this way, the craftsman began to work on the deck. Luogu stretched out a book casually, and sat on the side to read it. After Dashiki and Makita carried the things up, they saw Luogu beckoning to them, and then followed Luogu to the upper deck. Once in, it takes 2 or 3 hours. The craftsmen sitting on the deck couldn't help but look up occasionally. At first, they couldn't help shaking their heads and exclaiming, "It's good to be young." As a result, 3 hours passed by in a flash, and his work was almost over. The 3 people hadn't come out yet. Not only was he dumbfounded, it's scary to be young. By the time the 3 of them came out, the sky outside had gradually dimmed. The craftsman noticed that Luogu was refreshed, while Dashiki and Makita were a little pale. This made him look at Luogu like he was looking at a beast, but he still honestly explained the progress and content of the work. The materials have been disassembled, neatly cut and disassembled, and stacked on the deck neatly. Luogu was quite satisfied with this. After paying the reward, he said he could send the craftsman back. But the craftsman declined politely. Luogu even felt that the craftsman looked at him with inexplicable hatred. In the end, the craftsman walked into the jungle in such a cool and unrestrained manner. Whether he could walk out safely in the end was not the scope of Luogu's concern. Anyway, he said he wanted to give it away, but the other party refused. Then he turned around to see how Makita and Daska were doing. This question seemed abrupt, but in fact it was not at all. The 3 people had been discussing in the room for 3 hours about the possibility of capturing the Whitebeard crew. 1. Blackbeard Marshal D. Teach. 2nd, Fire Fist Ace. This is not a question of choosing one or the other, but a question that requires them all. Yes, after careful consideration, Luogu decided that these 2 pirates must not be let go. Now that they exist, and at the same time as they exist, they also exist in the sea, there is no possibility of catching one and letting one go. A Blackbeard who possesses the dark fruit is terrifying in itself. If he is allowed to possess the shock fruit, it is difficult to describe how terrifying this pirate is. I am not a big devil. I must wait until the hero has obtained all the divine equipment and upgraded his skills before fighting against the opponent. It would be a pity not to capture Blackbeard at this stage. This was something that Luogu confirmed while pushing the cart all the way back. However, there is a problem: how to deal with the fact that Blackbeard has no bounty. Although Luogu's navy was not unfamiliar with people, such as Brother Lester, Blackbeard's situation was too special. It was not so easy to achieve the results he wanted with Lester's power alone. So, in the room just now, Luogu mainly shared some things with Dashiki and Makita in this regard. Unfortunately, not many achievements. But even so, it also greatly stimulated Dashiki and Makita. Their faces turned pale, not because they were exhausted, but because they were frightened to a certain extent. The 2 of them were a little confused. They had just captured Crocodile. Why was Luogu suddenly so confused that he wanted to take action against a pirate worth million? As for the other Blackbeard, then who? Never heard of it? You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Pirate's Bounty Don't Run Away. Author, The Desolate Little Purity. Chapter 119. The night was already dark, and the ship was still docked at the same spot. It was already around this time, so it didn't matter if we stayed one more night and set off tomorrow. In the room, Luogu was holding a notebook and writing and drawing on it with a pen. Some things can't be done just by thinking about it, and require a certain degree of planning. If you want to catch Blackbeard, you can't just catch him. The issue of the bounty must be resolved. Only after this matter is settled can you attack him. Moreover, the time to start also needs to be considered. Before Ace was caught by him, Luogu quietly set such a time, and according to the information he knows, the time when Ace was arrested should be 3 days before Luffy and his party left the capital of Seven Waters. The specific time is unknown, and there can only be an approximate range here. And in this process, the first thing he has to do is to increase the bounty of Blackbeard. It's a little difficult. He tapped his forehead and wrote another line in his notebook, Ace's identity. According to the information currently known, Ace is the biological son of Pirate King Gold Roger. Blackbeard directly became Chiwehe by virtue of his achievements in arresting him, and this identity was also the main reason for the subsequent top war. Then this identity, with Luogu in front of him, can make a fuss, or need to hide? What would this world be like if there was no war? Luogu put down the pen and paper in his hand, looked at the night outside the window, and subconsciously smiled at the corner of his mouth. Well, Luffy and the others will probably lose 2 years of training, right? Then they will be beaten in the new world. Is life worse than death? As soon as he thought about this, he shook his head, but, what does their situation have to do with me? After saying this, he suddenly frowned again. No, it does matter. Luogu tapped his fingers on the table. How can these green little fruits turn into a huge fortune if they are not given time to grow? From this point of view, it is still necessary for them to practice for 2 years, right? However, this matter can be considered later. After all, how can I put it, even if there is no war, they will be beaten and go their separate ways, right? Temporarily suppressing these messy thoughts, Luogu wrote a line of words on the paper. First, increase the bounty for Blackbeard. And I wrote something below, something like, you can consider creating rumors and public opinion, using certain relationships, and making curved plans. During the process, my existence must be isolated. The means that can be considered are, and so on. Write down everything you can think of on the whole sheet of paper. After finishing the work, I read it again and crossed out some obviously unreliable content. For example, going directly to Akainu to tell him about the dangers of Blackbeard was something that was impossible without even thinking about it. Then, who can be used? Lester, Tina. Smoker. Or. Thinking of this, he hesitated slightly and wrote the name Garp on the paper. But when he looked at the name, he was dumbfounded. Just as it is impossible for him to go directly to Akainu to tell the danger of Blackbeard, it is also impossible for him to go directly to Garp and tell Garp that your identity as a grandson will soon be exposed, and that you will soon be arrested in Marlineford. Public execution. You don't want to think of a way. If you go back to the windmill, you really have to let the ant hit her head with a rolling pin or something, well, although it is not a rolling pin. But, this approach is not advisable. Because if Garp knows this from his own mouth, his position will become very dangerous. This is a very complicated guy. As a navy, he implements his own justice. But because of his position, he cannot fight to save Ace on the top, and the result is that, he is not human inside and out. Well, if said, let him know some speculative information through the sideway, will he consider what may happen in the future? But the tip of the pen in his hand clicked on the paper. Luogu's smile was a little bitter. Luffy's head is inherited from Garp, right? If he really maintains similar nerves, he may be it's hard to receive any hints. Even if you receive them, how can you deduce what might happen next? Do you really want to find him and tell him everything clearly? Luogu shook his head. This was the most undesirable method. But no matter what, carp must be used, and his existence may become crucial. After Luogu wrote the names of one person after another on the paper. When a person decides to do a big thing, he doesn't mind dragging many big people into the game at all. The most important thing is that he wants to be the one who can fish in troubled waters. In this case, the more mixed the water, the better. In the end, maybe the dark fruit is the real focus. Luogu sorted out all the overall content, but he didn't fully enumerate a stable line that would not be destroyed by anyone. Because there is no such thing. Any plan, any calculation in this world can only be done by manpower. If it is beyond 3 points, it depends on the situation and fate. No one should ever think of treating others as pawns on the chessboard, because there are always some people who can wake up from the chessboard, stand up, and become the ones who fall. However, doing one's best, obeying the destiny, earning is a fortune, and failing, in fact, has nothing to do with me directly. Everything will just run according to the original track. After closing the notebook and putting the pen away, Luogu yawned and was about to turn around and go back to sleep. But at this moment, he suddenly frowned. Are there guests? Immediately sat down again, took out a book from the table and opened it. Before reading a line of words, Luogu knew that the visitor had come to his door. He didn't knock on the door or try to pick the lock, but just waited quietly. After Luogu read the content of this line of writing, he spread the book on the table, put the notebook in the drawer, and then stood up and walked to the door. Opening the door, a woman was smiling at him. Luogu blinked, looked at the woman in front of him, and didn't know whether it was an accident or expected, so he had no choice but to move half of his body away and made a gesture of please. The woman came in, walked to the table with ease, pulled out a chair and sat down. Should I say, long time no see. Pirate's bounty don't run away. Author, The Desolate Little Purity. Chapter 120. Luogu calculated with his fingers, then shook his head and said, we haven't seen each other for about 5, 6, 7, or 8 days. It's more than that. Robin shook his head. I just didn't expect to see you here. But if you think about it carefully, ordinary pirate hunters will never come to Demon Valley Town, but you coming here is really not surprising at all. Luogu smiled, picked up the teapot and got 2 cups of black tea. Thank you. Robin brought over a glass. I heard that you had a lot of fun here recently. Who are you talking nonsense about? Luogu said with a smile. As a pirate hunter, he appeared in Demon Valley Town. He was like a sheep, put on wolf skin and mingled among the wolves. This dangerous and terrifying feeling of walking on thin ice is difficult for outsiders to understand. It was Robin who suddenly heard this and didn't know how to react for a while. I think you may have reversed the identities of wolf and sheep, right? Robin said. To the pirates in Demon Valley Town, you are the wolf. It's an honor. Luogu took a sip of black tea and said, so, why did you come here? Meet a bunch of interesting people by chance, so I plan to go on a short, stress-free trip. Robin smiled and said, my current captain is a very simple man. He found Magic Valley Town very interesting, and that's why he came here. Of course, before that, his real purpose, forget it, I won't talk about this, it's hard for a rational person like you to believe such a thing. Really, Luogu smiled, maybe it's people like me who believe in those bizarre things. Robin was silent for a moment, then nodded, I don't have anything to say to refute what you said. So, tell me. We plan to go to the sky. Robin pointed at the sky and said, do you believe the existence of Sky Island? It's an empty island. Luogu looked up at the sky, then nodded, I believe it. Really? Robin was a little surprised. Have you been there? No. Luogu shook his head. How could I have been to that kind of place? Besides, I won't go either. Why, I thought that if it were you, you might be more interested in this kind of thing, Robin said. Isn't the pursuit of secrecy and the unknown your goal? The summary is not bad, there is only one problem. Luogu put down his teacup. There are no wanted criminals up there. Robin was stunned for a moment, then laughed. You are such an incredible person. Okay. Sense and fantasy coexist. I have never seen such a strange person like you. Robin shook his head. Luogu didn't care about this. Everyone is a combination of contradictions. Robin muttered the sentence softly, and then nodded. It's a very interesting sentence, I will remember it. After saying that, she stood up and said, then it's time for me to say goodbye. So, you just came to say hello. When I was inquiring about news in Magic Valley Town, I happened to hear about you, so I paid a visit. I didn't expect to be able to find you so easily. I was a little carried away, so I came up to chat with you. Robin looked back at Luogu and smiled slightly. Please contact me often in the future. Luogu looked at the top of his head, and then sighed. I don't know any way to send the letter I wrote to you to the sky. In this world, the most indispensable thing is to create conditions, right? Robin said, as long as you think about it, there is nothing you can't do. Luogu's eyes flashed with light, and then he smiled softly. I really think I can get along with you very well. It's an honor. Robin smiled and came to the door, opened it and walked out. It came suddenly, went in a hurry, and Luogu didn't get up to see him off. He didn't take out the notebook from the drawer until after Robin had left for a long time. Picking up the pen on the table, after thinking for a while, he wrote a sentence. Snap it back on, tuck it in a drawer, and turn to sleep. There was nothing to say all night, and the next morning, the big ship set sail. Facing the rising sun, sailed to the sea. Luogu sat in the room and did not go out, but called Lester. This is the first time Rogu called Lester since the last call and said something about crocodile and armed domineering. I thought that Lester would still be undergoing painful training at this time, but I didn't expect that this guy's voice was unexpectedly energetic. Yo! My stupid brother. This was Lester's opening remarks. Luogu felt that the stock of brother probably couldn't be passed between the two of them. There is no way. This is also a hole I dug myself, and there are all big nails in it, so I have to continue to pick it up. I chatted with him casually, some didn't, most of them were recent developments. For example, how many pirates Rogu has caught, for example, the current location, and then asked about Lester's recent situation. How's the training going recently? Is there a female Navy dancer, and so on. Most of it is useless nonsense. It seems that it is only for the exchange of feelings. At the end, Lester's voice was choked with sobs. My stupid brother, I didn't expect that you called me just to chat with me. I'm so touched. What's so exciting about this? Luogu gritted his teeth loudly. From various angles, this was strictly a joke. I don't know how it was valued by Smoker and Tina. Gently tapping his forehead, Luogu suppressed his emotions and said, after leaving Moon Village, the only two people who can depend on each other in the sea are the two of us. Lester deeply believed in this statement. Of course, we are all from Moon Village. No matter what happens on this sea, we have to bear it together. So, if you really get into trouble, don't be afraid. I'll say hello over here. If there's a fight, there will be quite a few Marines that can be drawn out. Luogu was silent for 3 seconds, and then said, are you planning my business again? Let me tell you, even if we come from the same place, if you dare to steal my business, I will deal with you the same way. Humph, you are acting like a younger brother. How did you learn it? Luogu sighed deeply, and at the end, in a casual tone, he said nonchalantly, speaking of which, I recently met a very interesting guy in Demon Valley Town. According to my intuition, this guy he is a pirate, but there is no wanted notice for this person.